All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Verified Show. We have another great episode and a phenomenal guest, my friend Emily Onchain. Emily, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing very good. It's a sunny day. We're heading into the summer season, which everybody loves. We need more vitamin D. I think we can all say that. As developers that sit behind the computer all day, I think it's important to get a little sunlight, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And my dog literally just like coughed right when you said we need
They-
more vitamin D. Um,
Even dogs need it. Even dogs need it.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm excited for this conversation we're going to have because I mean, you have a phenomenal background. You've been in Web3 for quite some time. You have, a very interesting kind of journey into what we call a developer advocate or DevRel. Some might people know it as, which is a very sought after role. Number one. And number two, it's such an important role because advocating for tooling, infrastructure, anything of that nature in Web3 is vitally important to achieve adoption. And we can't do it purely on just marketing efforts. We need the DevRels of the world. So first off, I always like to ask my guests, how did you get into Web3? Like, what was that moment where? Tell us a little bit about your background. Obviously, would love to hear that. But then, what was that moment where you transitioned into blockchain?
Yeah, totally. So I knew about Bitcoin back in 2011,
Mm,
but it wasn't until after I'd already kind of gotten into tech a bit that I actually broke into the Web3 world and blockchain. So that was actually in 2017. So I was always kind of a computer nerd, I guess.
yeah,
I had this computer teacher when I was like 12 years old, and he would like take apart the computer and like show us how it worked. And he used to call it a beast. And I always remember that. And I thought it was so funny. But I loved it. I actually got 100% in computers.
there you go.
But anyway, that being said, I had got on with this startup company called Easy Agent Pro back, I think it was 2016. And I was a project manager, but I was designing like WordPress websites for real estate agents. And I just got really interested in the back end side of things as well. So I ended up, wanting to pursue that. And I ended up doing a coding boot camp, and it was at this boot camp that one of the guys that was in my particular group was really into crypto and altcoins. And he was like, hey, he's like, I got into Ripple. And he was like, there's this other coin and I think you should hop on it. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just put like $39 to it. And within a matter of months, it 1,000x'd,
Oh wow.
and it was actually Verge. But the problem was at the time, this guy had just showed me how to do it, but I didn't fully understand how to take it out. And so after that experience, I was like, I'm going to learn everything there is to learn about this. And I kept my Verge, the $39 in. I mean, obviously it was more than that by that point. And I waited until the next bull run to finally like take it out and make money off of it. And I went from there learning everything I could. I mean, like IPFS, Solidity, the frameworks at the time, which was actually Truffle.
Mm,
And I got super into it. And then I started getting a smaller community around me, mostly women who also wanted to learn more about Web3. They were more interested in like actually crypto, which I think is where a lot of people get in, just like crypto and making money off of it rather than learning the underlying technology. And then I eventually got further into Python and data science as well. And then after I pursued that and got some certifications, that's when I landed my first role actually at SimbaChain. And at the
mm.
time, I came on as a product manager. But eventually, I had this really awesome boss, and he came over from Google. And he's actually the one who was like, well, you're over documentation. You're actually doing developer relations work. And that was my first kind of exposure to that. And I realized I really loved it. I really wanted to niche in that area. And that's how I got into DevRel in Web3.
Nice. Yeah, that's an interesting journey. I mean, a lot of people start off, same with myself, in the crypto side, but I love it when you get people like yourself or even myself that's looked further into the technology, because that's really what enables and fuels. Crypto is just like one application of a myriad of
Exactly.
applications, right? And then to be able to get into a role like DevRel, like talk to me about, we'll get into your brand and Emily Onchain here in a minute, but talk to me about just the nature of DevRel. Why is DevRel so important? You've been doing it for a while now, and I think you can, more than say that it's such a needed position for a lot of Web3 companies to have. Talk to us about why it's so important to need a DevRel.
Yeah. So when a demand exists, devs are going to be looking for solutions regardless. And the role of DevRel is to just make sure that we are advocating and putting those tools in the places where the DevRels are looking, or sorry, where the developers are already looking. And then on top of that, we're there to help them learn how to easily use the tool. If you are a developer or developers, then you know that having a very low barrier to entry is really important when it comes to getting familiar with any new tool. So, developers are inclined to, gear themselves towards efficiency and effectiveness.
Mhm.
You are a developer or developers, they can get tunnel vision and be sitting there coding for like 8 hours. And it's like, all that time needs to be put towards, whatever they're building, not so much time wasted on continuing to try to figure out like clunky technology. And so the importance of DevRel is just one, to streamline that process for them so that we can actually get building and creating all the awesome, innovative, new stuff that we want to put out into the world in Web3. And then also, we need to have that added edge and that know-how that is often lacking with traditional marketing, where in Web3, we have to know, where are these developers hanging out? Where are the communities? Where can we target advertising so they can actually get their hands on this new technology?
Yeah, devs learn from devs. I've heard you say that a few times on your X, and I think I couldn't agree with it more. And you built quite a brand, because I think that's also important. To advocate for a tool is one thing, but to be able to be a respectable developer who knows what they're talking about, knows where the community lies, and also knows how to speak to the community is really difficult. It is not easy, to start from scratch and build your social media presence. I mean, anybody can play the game and bot things out. But I think more importantly, when you create an organic developer community, they're obviously more smarter than the average degen crypto, let's say crypto bro, crypto gal. And I think it's very advantageous to create this authentic, side of what you've done. So I want to know more about Emily Onchain. Where did that kind of originate? And I think you told me you have a course that'll be coming out too. So love for our viewers to get a chance to kind of get an inside scoop on what that's going to be about.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on it really well. In this day and age with AI running rampant, people are really hungry for authenticity. They want something real, and especially developers. They want to make sure they're not buying into something that looks shiny on the outside, but it doesn't give them anything of substance. And I think that's really the key in building branding right now, and especially in Web3, is just be yourself and be authentic, and make sure you are just providing that value, however small bites it might be in. And I think that's the way you really start building a real genuine community. So that was the premise of this course, is we wanted to create something that was really digestible so that people could do the first course and get a feel for developer relations and Web3, and then be able to really orient themselves towards which nuance they want to pursue. In DevRel, there are many sort of paths you can take. So there's nuance between the roles,
Mm.
and that will be what the follow-up course will lead into. And we just wanted it to be something where it's something a developer or somebody that's, they might not be a developer, but they're interested in this path, and they could consume and like watch a video a day and just, get that and then go deeper into the curriculum and really get a feel for Web3 and developer relations, and be able to, authentically realize if that's the path they want to pursue. And then on top of that, even if somebody was a developer taking this course, it's still going to teach them so many tools that they can apply, just to even enhance themselves as a developer and how they interact and move in the space. So I think it's really important to learn how to speak clearly about tech, how to be able to, translate these tools in Web3 over to why they're relevant to Web2. Because a lot of the times when you get hired onto a Web3 company, part of that is focused on integration, on how we can integrate this Web3 technology with a lot of, Web2 companies. So it's really important also to be able to identify and to speak on real world use cases as well, and just how it can be super relevant. I think it's cool to have things like, NFTs and art as a use case, but it's also interesting to think about, wow, we can apply NFTs to car titles, for example, and how would that look like? And how does the technology look as it becomes more and more relevant into a lot of real world use cases that can really be the glue in our current society, and just making things more streamlined and more secure, and just all the lovely things that blockchain technology really opens up.
Yeah, we love that. I think it's so important that you said it really well. It's advocating for a technology that isn't just for Web3. It really is to kind of harmoniously integrate both worlds. And hopefully one day we'll just say the internet again. I think
Of
we've kind of
course.
gotten this like two-sided, a little bit of a juxtapose Web2 versus Web3. And eventually I would love to see just the web, right? The internet. Like it's all culminating back to the original tenets in which the internet was designed to be, fully decentralized in a way where we have our data ownership, privacy. Speaking of privacy, you've done a great job in terms of your explanation of why advocating tooling is important. You've actually been doing that a lot for VLayer. I've noticed that you've been reposting, sharing your experience. You got a lot of interesting takes on your own X about VLayer. I guess first off, what attracted you to what did you love about VLayer? I mean, what got you to be interested, and even more importantly, you kind of just started talking about us. What led you to that?
Yeah. So what I really love about VLayer is just how it, elevates EVM in general, and it just really, lowers the barrier to entry for developers to get up and running with some pretty awesome new features that they've recently rolled out,
Mhm.
like time travel and teleport, with a focal point on, web proofs as well, just
Yeah.
because I think web proofs are a super hot topic and they're super important, especially when we're talking about real world use cases, which I know we were talking earlier about some of them that you were kind of excited about. And I just think it just adds that layer of relevance and ease of use, which I
Mm.
think is really important, especially when we're talking about Web3 and blockchain technology. Because, like you said, in the future, we want it ideally to be that it's just the internet and we're able to do all of these cool things, but it's not so clunky and we're not so in the weeds that every single person, whenever they're using these tools, is thinking, oh, this is Web3 compared to Web2. It's like we're just doing the thing, we're doing the cool thing, with all of this underlying, all of this stuff going on under the hood. And we don't necessarily have to overly think about it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
We don't have to do that heavy lifting. And so I think that with VLayer, it really allows that streamlined process, and it adds new factors now that weren't really possible in regards to EVM prior. So I think that's really exciting for a lot of devs in the space. And it's just really cool to see that. because obviously, you know, with a lot of technology that was rolled out initially, there's going to be snags with it. And so it's awesome to see a company like VLayer just improving all of those processes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the use cases you and I are talking about, you being somewhat of an influencer and you're only growing your community. And I'd say beyond just X, you have a decent community and just a following as you've kind of gotten into space early on. It's also about proving the verifiability of followers, you know, and authenticating. Even, you know, we have these, you know, we call them influencer marketing platforms, right? How do I prove that you posted something? Because there's a lot of money in the influencer KOL space, right? There's a ton of money. People spend crazy amounts of money to get somebody that has a decent sized audience to repost, to quote, retweet. And it amazes me that it's the technology right now is like, take a screenshot to prove that you did it. Right. It's like, that's it. Like, that can easily be manipulated, tampered with. I think we were talking about there's like over $3.2 billion of KOL fraud. And so you, as somebody that has a decent marketplace of followers, like, what are your thoughts about, you know, the ZKTLS using the web proofs of what we were just talking about, what that can enable in terms of like proving followers and proving the ability that you actually did post something, so you can ensure the project that's paying you is actually getting their money's worth, getting the content that they asked to get distributed out, right?
I will answer that. Stella, like, I swear my neighbor just knows what he's doing.
Must know we're interviewing. My goodness.
Stella, I'm so sorry. Like, this was not happening prior. Okay. And I will show her on the camera in a second, but
Yeah.
I think, oh, sorry. I think that particular use case is crucial right now. Something I've noticed personally is just, you know, just with the rise of everything like bots and AI, just constantly being questioned whether I'm authentic or the work that I have done is authentic, and even just like your identity as well, like people thinking you might be some sort of bot or something. I think being able to verify that you have authentically produced something is just so important, and it would just make everything so much easier. I can look at my experience now as opposed to even back at SimbaChain around 2021, before there was that huge, you know, uprising with AI. I shouldn't call it an uprising. I'm making it sound like a weird robot movie, but you know, before there was that massive, you know, boom in AI, you know, I would create things or documentation, and it was just known that, you know, I had created that. But since then, I'll even show examples of that work, just for other reasons, and people will immediately say like, "But did you use Chat GPT?" You know, and I'm like, you can't. I was like, no, but I mean, we need to get to a place where using AI as a tool is more understood, but then being able to like verify that this came from me, is also easily done. And I think with web proofs and what you're saying is exactly what we need right now.
Yeah, I think you told me one time, I don't know if somebody that was on your X or maybe it was on YouTube, I can't remember, but you said they thought you weren't real. They thought you were an AI agent just because you were
Yeah,
doing some kind of video and the comment was, this isn't a real person.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, they thought it was like AI generated or something, and I was like, you
How do
gotta
I
find
prove I'm real now?
you gotta find that right balance between being overly polished and you know, well, because when you're doing technical writing, I mean, what you learn is that it's some people think it's just using a bunch of fancy technical words. Like, you're actually supposed to distill it down and say the most in the least, right?
Mhm.
So that you can just be able to convey how to use the technology better. And so yeah, I've definitely experienced that more than once, where people were really sus about the product I was putting out, and I had to be like, no, like, this came from a human, you know. But it poses a really interesting problem that I think that we wouldn't have necessarily thought would happen. And that's why I just find Web3 just so interesting in general, because we're always faced with these new interesting challenges that we couldn't have necessarily thought up until we are presented with them.
Yeah.
Um,
No, spot on. And I'm glad that, I know you're real. I've met you before, so I can vouch people that are watching that this is a not AI generated interview. This is a real person. But it does beg the question, how do we prove the authenticity of myself, Emily Onchain, and anybody else, and to think where people feel more trusting and comfortable that like, okay, this is a real person. I think this is where we see some challenges with like X spaces. Spaces are great. I've been on them. I've hosted them, but really the question is like, how do I know if these are even real people talking in the background, right? I think now we were like, okay, well, video will help because now people can see me, but that even raises the bar too, because now, like you said, that might also be construed as like, well, that's not real either. So we're getting into this interesting paradigm that I don't think we were ready to be in, to have to prove who we are. And I think what you've said about VLayer and the provability of these things is so vitally important. The other thing that's very important is the developer experience. All right, we talked about this before, the DX or the DevX, however you want to say it. In order to achieve tooling adoption as a DevRel, you have to also make sure that the developer experience is seamless, it's smooth, there's no wrinkles or bottlenecks, because oftentimes if devs, they give it a shot and if there's too many hurdles, they move on. You've said that many times before in our conversations in the past. There usually is a short window because I think you said it, there's a shiny new tool syndrome we all kind of fall addicted to. There's a new tool that comes out, but you only get a small window of opportunity to get the attention of a developer before they either decide they're going to go further into it and even potentially spend money, or they're going to leave. And so talk to me about like your experience, particularly with, I know VLayer just went live on mainnet. Tell me about your kind of the developer experience from your end as a dev, on what you've liked about it, what your experience was like.
Yeah, so I think you've just touched on a really important point, which I like to just refer to, and I guess a lot of people refer to as retention,
Mm.
right? So, it's great to get developers to the point where they are trying out your new tool for the first time. But yeah, if they just drop it and go on to the next thing, that's not super great, and it won't necessarily turn into sales. So retention is super important. And exactly as you've stated, it all comes down to that developer experience and that interface that they are playing with. And that's one thing I noticed immediately when it comes to VLayer, is just how streamlined that process is, how clean and clear it is. It's not clunky and messy. There's other tools that I have played around with, and it's just confusing. You
Mm.
don't want to have a developer using your tool for the first time, and maybe they got an idea that it might be for one thing, and then they're in there and then they're confused on what it's actually for, or they realize it's not what they actually need. Whereas VLayer is just super succinct, and it also gives you those kind of real world use cases that you get to play with, and you get to see how their new take on this technology is super relevant, and how it can really work for you and make your life easier as a dev, because developers are always looking for that ease of use. They want things that make their processes easier, make their day-to-day routine and work routine easier, not harder, right? So that's something I think VLayer has done really well. And then, like I said, just elevating the entire ability to use EVM, and that entire space is just awesome. Because there's people that maybe they're annoyed at certain things when it comes to EVM, and then they see that VLayer has now put out these solutions to that, that now gives them access to functions that they weren't able to
Yeah.
do prior. So I think that's just really beautiful. And I think people underestimate the importance of iteration. They're often trying to just create a brand new technology or a brand new tool or a brand, without using the existing technology or infrastructure that's already there. And I think when you have a company that really builds off of what's already beautiful, and they just make it that much more beautiful, then it's something that most devs are going to want to be a part of.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, that's Solidity. There's, no, I mean, other than the early days where it was a bit ugly code, Solidity is not bad. We love it, and so there's no reason to reinvent new. I know there's other projects out there that have provided their own versions of a Solidity type language, programming language, and obviously non-EVM change is a different, whole different world with different languages. So the ability to enhance Solidity beyond its capabilities now is just basically what you said, just to make it prettier, right? It's something that we recognize works, but with VLayer, the added functionalities, and right now specifically web proofs or zk-TLS, is an added feature that it really enhances the developer experience on what we would say devs are already familiar and comfortable using within the Solidity framework, to now realize there's these added functionalities that didn't exist before, like you mentioned.
I just wanted to say, I think you've really nailed it when you've identified that developers are really creatures of habit. So taking something like Solidity, where they're really familiar with, and just making that experience even better is something they're going to really hold on to. And I mean, developers that I talk to, I mean, especially just when you look at Web 2 ones, like you talk to some older developers and you're like, oh my gosh, like you're still obsessed with this one coding language. And it's like there's so many more like efficient paths you can take now. But yeah, they're just creatures of habit. And I think when you can understand the nature of a type of people or creature like developers, and work with it rather than against it, then you are going to get some awesome results.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. This has been a phenomenal conversation. Again, we're thrilled. Thank you so much for being such a strong advocate of VLayer. If people want to get a chance to connect with you or follow you, where can they go and find out more about that?
Yeah, so you can check out emilyonchain.com, and you can also find me on X, Emily_Onchain, and follow me there. I like to post valuable ideas on tech and little things that can make your life easier, especially involving DevRel. And I also like to show you pictures sometimes of my dogs or things like that. So I just find Web3 and the entire space to be super exciting and fun. And I just love all of the new technologies and use cases, and all of the innovative people that are involved in this that are involved in this community. So definitely come say hi. And if you have any cool ideas or questions, feel free to comment. I always love having conversations and learning new things.
You heard it, guys and gals. Go check her out. Feel free to connect with her and ask away. She's very open to DMs and questions, and look ahead. As she mentioned earlier, she will have a course coming out on DevRel. So if you are interested, I believe it'll probably be on the website. I'm sure there'll be a wait list because I think it's going to be coming out relatively soon. But other than that, Emily Onchain, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much again for coming on the show. And yeah, have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Scott.